One's ready. One's ready. Go!
Everybody, welcome back to the One's Ready podcast. This is your daily drop for the 6th of June, brought to you by HOIST. If you guys are looking for IV level hydration that not only tastes good, but has 0 dyes in it, HOIST is where you need to go. DrinkHOIST.com, use the promo code One's Ready, or you can get it at not any gas station, but you can get them at gas stations, HEB, Safeways, Kroger's. If you're on a military installation, you should be able to get them at the commissaries. Great tasting IV level hydration. Get yourself hydrated before, during, and after your workouts. All right. If you're new here, welcome. And this is the news that Public Affairs for the Department of the Air Force puts together and then sends out, or, well, they don't really send it out anymore. You have to go look for it. What I've done is I've run it through some AI just to give you the gist of it, because if not, the entire document is pretty lengthy and we'd be here for a while. So here we go. This is the joint news. Air and Space Force's 3-star appointed NATO's top officer. Lieutenant General Christopher Cavoli, a 3-star from the Air and Space Forces, have been named NATO's Supreme Allied Commander of Europe. He will oversee joint defense efforts against Iranian missile and drone attacks in Israel, marking his 5th role since joining the joint staff. Jeez, how much are they going to give this dude? That's 5 roles since he joined. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, when you go to your unit, right, you're going to have your primary mission. You'll probably have 1 or 2 additional duties, and not just additional duties. Like, you know, if you're at a unit for long enough, they're going to kind of move you in positions and that kind of stuff just to get, you know, more exposure to things and professionally develop you and that kind of stuff. But as the commander and as a lieutenant general, sending you through 5, like, that's a lot since being at the joint staff. Anyway, next, Defense Secretary Pete Hexeth warns NATO allies on 5% GDP defense spending target. He urged NATO allies to increase defense spending to 5% of their GDP, noting that some nations are not meeting the target. He highlighted pressure from the former President Trump and why does it say former President Trump? From President Trump to propose reduce U.S. commitments to NATO if allies fail to meet the goal. If you guys aren't tracking, the U.S. funds the majority of NATO. So asking these countries that are putting in 1%, 2%, 3%, and then expecting the U.S. to just carry the weight on everything else, like asking them to do 5% of their GDP towards NATO, like that's not a tall order, and that is not an unreasonable ask. Next, National Guard prepares 20,000 troops for U.S.-Mexico border mission. The Army National Guard, will deploy 20,000 troops to the U.S.-Mexico border to address immigration issues, with soldiers trained for the mission. Democrats raised concerns about the Department of Homeland Security's lack of reimbursement for their operation. Okay, I do wonder what that's going to cost, but it's also securing our border, which is what we've needed to do for quite some time now. So I get it. It's going to cost money, but it's something that we've got to do. Next, CENTCOM, or Central Command, reports ISIS threat in Iraq and Syria after operations. CENTCOM conducted operations in Iraq and Syria, killing 5 ISIS operatives in May, but warned of a persistent threat from the group. By the end of fiscal year 25, CENTCOM forces will reduce their presence in Syria to 1 military base. I bet you guys didn't know we were still in Syria, did you? Gotcha. Kind of like Congress didn't know that we were operating in Africa. Yeah, there's a lot Congress doesn't know. There's a lot of stuff that Congress also keeps from us too. So let's be clear about that. All right. Next, Pentagon faces scrutiny over fraud allegations in defense audits. The Pentagon is under investigation for fraudulent budget audits, with military readiness at risk due to $10.8 billion in fraud between 2017 and 2024. Defense Secretary acknowledged the need for a government efficiency review to address the issue. That's a whole lot of money. And granted, I'll say this and don't roast me for it. Like, in the grand scheme of how much of a budget the DoD gets and everything, from 7 years to $10.8 billion over 7 years is an insane. It's insane for us taxpayers to actually think about, but from DoD budget perspective, like, that's not that much money, but it is. You know what I mean? All right, next, U.S. shifts anti-drone technology focus from Ukraine to Israel. The Defense Department is redirecting anti-drone technology from Ukraine to U.S. Central Command to counter threats in Israel. Defense Secretary Pete Hexeth emphasized the need for rapid acquisition to protect U.S. forces from Iranian drone attacks. 100%, you guys have heard me drone on about this. You're probably tired of hearing it. Our acquisitions process is slow and broken, and we need rapid acquisition. SOCOM has not necessarily cracked the egg on it, but it is way, way quicker than Big Blue Air Force, Big Blue Navy, and that kind of stuff. So, SOCOM's model isn't a bad one to follow. However, even when you look at SOCOM, it is still slow compared to what we need to be at, especially if we're going to start countering drone stuff. All right, this is Air Force specific news. Air Force revives hypersonic missile program with rapid response. The Air Force is resuming its hypersonic missile program, the ARRWS, after mixed test results since 2018, using proximity fuses for cost efficiency. Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General David Alvin, and former Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall stressed the need for affordable, diverse missile capabilities. Next, Air Force Chief outlines F-47 next generation fighter features. Chief of Staff of the Air Force shared details on the F-47 next generation air dominance fighter, emphasizing speed, agility, and stealth. The F-47 aims to counter modern threats while maintaining a cost-effective design compared to the F-22 Raptor. What's kind of wild, like, yeah, all the stuff on the outside of the plane and make the plane work, but when you start talking about inside the cockpit and the kind of human factors and the ergonometry of everything, you had, let's just look at F-16s, right? F-16s were, they're a very tight fit, a very capable aircraft, but kind of the layout of things isn't great, right? Then you look at the F-22 and you can kind of see a things got better, right? But they're not perfect, but they got better. Then you got the F-35. So I'm going in kind of chronological order here, right? You got the F-35, which is kind of the far end of the spectrum, where it's very human based and not perfect, of course, but there's a lot of things with it that make sense to the human factor and human performance, right? The F-22 is kind of that hybrid. You could see the evolution. So now I'm really curious to see what the F-47 is going to look like, and the B-21 for that matter. But the F-47, in terms of what it's going to look like inside the cockpit and how it's going to conform to the human even more than the F-35 does. So it's pretty cool to look at and talk to some of the pilots that fly all these things about it. All right, next. New game-changing anti-ship weapon tested by the Air Force. The Air Force tested a QuickSink missile capable of rapidly destroying maritime targets, enhancing anti-ship capabilities. Chief of Staff of the Air Force, David Alvin, noted its potential to strike both stationary and moving vessels effectively. Cool. Hope they're not insanely expensive and can be produced and procured quickly. Because we have some other options that are out there that we have a whole lot of, a plentiful amount of them, right? But they are probably less capable than this. So next, Air Force modifies Qatar gifted plane at a cost of under $400 million. The Air Force will modify a Boeing 747 gifted by Qatar for less than $400 million. Despite concerns over the cost overruns, Air Force Secretary Air Force Secretary Dr. Troy Mink testified that the VC-25 Bravo program's expenses have been accounted for, though critics warn costs could reach $1 billion. That's insane for an aircraft. Jeez. All right. Next, cancer risk at Air Force missile sites deemed low by a study. A study found low cancer risk at Air Force missile sites despite higher cancer rates among missileers. Air Force Global Strike Command and the Department of Veteran Affairs are working to support 40% of the airmen affected. Jeez, 40% of missileers are impacted and have higher cancer rates. Dude, that is not cool. All right, next, Transgender Air Force Academy cadets face military ban. Transgender cadets at the Air Force Academy face a ban from the service, impacting 30 members following a policy update. The decision has sparked legal challenges, with critics arguing it hinders military readiness and fairness. You know, I'm actually kind of curious about this. If the military, if those transgender members get banned from serving and they've received an education from the Air Force Academy, you know, whether it's their freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior year, right? And they're not allowed to serve, their service for the following years is kind of the payback for their education. So with these members that applied and got educated while under the Biden administration, when they were allowed to, are they going to require them to pay back the education benefits? Because what you could do is, if you say you went to the Air Force Academy and you were that good at football that you ended up getting drafted by the NFL, or you ended up getting signed to an NFL team, you owe the cost of your education, the tuition, back to the Air Force Academy, since you're not able to serve at that point. As much as I'm in favor of all this, I don't necessarily think it would be fair to require the cadets, the transgender cadets, to have to repay their education when they signed up, they were allowed to serve. That's just my thoughts on it, though. F-16 pilots received warm welcome after emergency landing. The Air Force F-16 pilots made an emergency landing in St. Paul Island, Alaska, and were warmly welcomed by locals with food and support. Yeah, because I bet they weren't prepared to land there. I mean, I'm sure they were probably wearing poopy suits or whatever, or exposure suits, but Captain Alvin Nelson noted the significant community support despite the pilot's inability to attend a planned wedding. What the hell? Okay. Space Force news. SpaceX contracts at risk amid Trump and Musk tensions. Have you guys seen this? It's wild on X right now. President Trump's threat to cancel SpaceX contracts could disrupt the national security space launch program, impacting 138 U.S. rocket launches. The Space Force shifted 2 GPS-3F missions to SpaceX due to delays in the ULA's Vulcan Centaur rocket. Okay, regardless of whoever side you're on this, right? Please tell me any other company that is able to do what SpaceX does. You imagine, like, when we start talking about how far behind the space race the U.S. is compared to China, and SpaceX is gaining ground. SpaceX is getting us, America, Space Force, and everything else, like, helping us gain ground, right? And the cost is relatively cheap when we start talking about space travel and that kind of stuff and getting there. So because of egos or because of disagreements, because a little spat, right? The bromance was good just 3 days ago. We're going to cancel contracts to SpaceX and get ourselves even further behind or farther behind in the space race. Make that make sense to me. I don't understand that. Like, egos have got to get dropped here. And that's not even counting old Jared Isaacman not getting to be the NASA administrator. I mean, is there someone who is more qualified than him to do that? Maybe Mark Kelly, maybe, but like, Jared Isaacman is the dude for it. And the fact that we let some prick come in there and torpedo it is unreal to me. So I'm hoping that President Trump will just say, hey, I don't care what you guys say. He's my guy. I'm putting Isaacman in as the NASA administrator, but I don't know if he'll do that. All right, next, Space Force Guardian and NASA astronaut shares ISS experience. Colonel Nick Hague discussed his International Space Station mission on the WUSA broadcast, highlighting challenges since joining the Space Force in 2019. He emphasized teamwork and space operations, including bringing back 2 astronauts from the ISS. Next, Space Force reflects on its early, unconstrained days. Retired Lieutenant General John Shaw reflected on the Space Force's early days, discussing its cultural shift and growing influence. He highlighted opportunities and challenges for the service as it collaborates with commercial partners. I agree. And they're still trying to find themselves, which is good because they're a fledgling service and they need to secure it, or they need to figure out their culture and what they're going to do with their enlisted officers and civilians. All right. Next, House warns of delayed defense. I think these are of interest. House warns of delayed defense budget impact on Space Force. The House Armed Services Committee criticized the White House for delaying the FY26 defense budget, which could lead to Space Force funding cuts. Chairman Mike Rogers stressed the need for a timely budget to inform military decisions and avoid inefficiencies. Next, S-band allocation for Golden Dome threatened by Spectrum auction. Plans to auction the S-band for Golden Dome missile defense system could disrupt military radar operations, according to a CSIS report. The Senate's FY25 reconciliation package includes provisions to preserve the band for military use despite telecom interference concerns. All right, that is it. Hope you guys have a great weekend. Hope you're enjoying the episode that just released today, and we'll catch you later. Out.